Okay. Hello. Let me just get some confirmation that this is working. Looks like it's working to me. Anyone in the chat, drop me a line. Can you see me? Hey, I'm back. Great. Okay, I'm back. We're back. Great. Okay, so sorry about the interruption. That's always fun. Am I? Yeah. Okay, we're making sound and all that. Alrighty. Boy, that's a lot of thought streams all at once. Okay. Minor network hiccup. Let me just retweet my tweet to tweet about tweets. Back. And we're back. Okay. So, still working on this jobs microservice. Still twitching all of the twitches, hopefully. You guys are still with me. I'm going to close down maybe a couple of tabs, which might be chewing up some of my... ooh, hang on a second. Yeah, I think it might be a bandwidth issue. Let me... Okay, so I've closed my hogging tabs and my password manager, which tends to freak out, and all of the other things. We should be good now. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Now let's talk about the freaking microservice again. All right, what I was trying to explain, I have no idea when the stream went down, so I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. What I was attempting to explain was that currently this microservice is basically set up so that for the only URL that's being served is the root URL. And if you go to any subsequent URL or any other URL based on that, so if I add a slash and some numbers, it breaks. If I add a word, it breaks. If I do anything other than basically just this URL, it breaks. What we want to do is make this a little more steadfastly, hopefully to work in a way that we expect, so that we can pass in URLs with query parameters. Based on those parameters, render different job listings. That's going to take a few different tools. I think, though, that it won't be too troubling or too difficult to explain on stream. We're going to use some React magic. We're going to use some Express stuff, probably. And we're going to end up adding some parameters and inputs to the microservice that we've built, or to the Node app that we've built. So some of these functions will get a little more well-developed along the way. So what's the best way to start explaining this? I'm going to run this thing locally. I think that's the command I've got. Yes. Okay, running this thing locally, which means that now I can open it in my browser on port 3000. So if I do localhost 3000, we've got this same thing. So it's the exact same app, just this one's running on a VM in the web. This one is running on my machine here. So first things first, I'm going to replace this with a star, which should mean that now every URL renders the same thing. It went blank for a second there because I've got nodemon running in the background, which is monitoring my source code for changes. So that's sort of to be expected. Anyway, here we go. So now any URL I put into here will render the same content, and our goal is to make the page dynamic based on what shows up there. So let us begin. Let's continue on kind of the journey here. Okay, so let's look at the way the app is structured right now. So when Express gets a URL or gets a request for any given URL, it passes in, runs this load jobs function for right now a statically declared market. So this latitude and longitude happens to be Charlotte, which is where I live. But what we'd like to do is define this market using a URL parameter or parameters or number of options. And then based on that, we can render job listings for that market. What we might want to do too is take this logic out of the Express side of things and move it all over to the React side of things, so that Express's only job is to stand up the web server and route traffic into the React app that does the smarts. What that, of course, means is that this functionality, load jobs and fetch jobs from market, get market from latitude and longitude, will be exported out of this, or not exported, but removed from this source file here. So maybe that's the way to start. So this index.js will really just be kind of the root of the application from a web server perspective. And then inside of this source, we'll create an index file that gets rendered instead. So let's start with that. This is going to take some restructuring, but that's completely and totally okay. So I'm going to create index.js. Inside of here, we're going to give this a different name. app.js. Yeah, that feels right. Okay, so to do that, to do this, we of course have to declare this. I don't have, actually I think I did set up ES6 to work on this, right? No, I have to do requires, okay. Okay, so we're creating a basic React component which will spit out a set up the app from this is the, ooh, someone's at my doorbell. If you guys could hear that. This is the mounting point for the app from Express. Who on earth is that? Oh, it's a delivery. No big deal. Okay, so we're going to do return, and at least to start, we're going to make this fairly basic, and this is going to be, we'll do h1 with hello world. So essentially what I'm going to do is unhook all the prettier is so annoying. I think I might get rid of prettier. It's really, it bugs the shit out of me. It was a fun experiment, but it really doesn't work for me. Yeah, let's do that. Prettier. Well, maybe I can make it do what I want. True. We want to use single quotes here. Tab widths are fine. Trailing comma. All gamma. Okay, in theory, no, I think we're still just going to get rid of prettier. It was fun while it lasted. So, buy prettier. Bye. Out of my face. Okay, good. Now I have strings must use a single quote everywhere. I think I can auto fix this though. All auto fixable problems. Give me back my single quotes everywhere. Okay, that's going to happen in a lot of places. I prefer single quotes. I should have configured prettier to also do that, but I didn't. Okay. So let's set this up like I was intending to do. So I know this is going to get bigger than this. We'll do the thing. Oh my god. I don't know how to unplug it then. Oops. Prettier. forget how I set it up. That's annoying. All right, maybe we'll just live with it. It feels stupid, but we will. All right. So what we want to do here, or I'll show you now, essentially what we've done is we set up this app component, which we want to render from index.js. So I'm going to get rid of some of the smarts here, and in this app get blah, 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 I'm going to comment this code out for now because we'll end up reusing it later. We're going to say res.send react DOM server.render to static markup, and then we're going to say app. And inside of here, we're going to say const app equals require /source/app. We don't need this job listing anymore. We don't need that anymore because it's not being used. We'll clean this up in a bit, promise. Okay, so now, excuse me, I save this. Every single URL should just render the app component to static markup, which now looks the same. What have I done? It might have broken. Address in use, okay. It's possible that this thing got mixed up because I added some files and made it unhappy. Now I have nothing rendering, which is not what I was expecting. Nothing? Really? Nothing? Okay. Great. Well, it's not what I expected, as you can imagine. Still nothing. I might need to feed this in a code too. No. Just kind of doing some investigating here. Okay, that worked. So this means either that, I see. New app, I need to actually instantiate it. Give this a second to refresh. There we go. Okay. So now I want to take all of this stuff and put it inside of the app logic somewhere. First things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a library, a dependency called React Router, which will help us to pull in information from the URL. So let's do that. Const, well, we have to add it first. So yarn add React Router and React Router DOM. We're going to need both of those packages. And I'll pull up the website here so that I can explain what all this is doing. Shoot. How are we doing in Twitch chat here? Quiet. Okay. I'm with that. So we added those dependencies. I'm going to bring up the web page in here. This is declarative routing for React. It allows you to build routes in a way that is nestable and logicalable and all of the things that you might be used to if you've done something like development in, oh goodness, maybe Vue or Angular have similar routing strategies. Okay, so it makes some comparisons to static routing. It's got a whole history and all that. We are building essentially a dynamic routing solution here. So let's talk about how that works. So there's a couple of things we're going to have to do to make that happen. The easiest way to do it, the simplest example, let's go to a basic example, which is all we really need to start. In the basic example, they define a home component, an about component, and a topics component, which are just sort of the 3 pages that are going to be rendered. There are specific topic pages as well underneath. And it renders those as through here. So these are, you can see that this has a couple of different routes that are declared with some components that are rendered when those routes are matched. And there's really not much more to it than this. It's very simple. It will look foreign at first, but it's not super hard to set it up. Some of the subtleties here and some of the shortcuts that they're using is that this is a shortcut syntax to say that match is being passed in as a prop to the component. Match is describes the part of the URL that matches the descriptive path that the route has here. That might not be the best way of explaining everything, but let's talk about. We'll go through the quick start here, and we'll build up from there. We really won't need too much in the way of routes here. In fact, we may only render with one route, unless we decide there are going to be a few different ways to format the job listing. But we can talk about that in a minute. So, all right. So the most basic example is that you define a router, which is sort of your outermost component that does the magic routing. Inside of it is componentry that displays markup that displays your rendered components, and then the routes, which decide what to display on the screen. So we're going to do exactly that. And you can see that they pull in from React Router DOM a few different things. And I may not have actually needed to add React Router, that dependency, but we'll approach that as we do. So let's start here. We're going to try and add this around the app component. We may decide against that in the future. Okay. Convert some syntax here. Keep the linter happy. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a browser router. Might sound a little funny to have that as the syntax to call it a browser router, but there are a couple of different places where this React router works. Namely, the one I'm thinking of is React Native, which has a different routing paradigm than a browser. There goes an ambulance. Sorry if you can hear that. Inside of the browser router, you can see, so they renamed it to router in this example. We're just going to keep it named browser router. In the basic example, they have some links at the top, which we won't really need. They have this horizontal rule, which is, where'd the example go? It was there. A line across the screen, and then a few routes that are declared that only render when they match these paths. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do route path equals /. We'll start with that. And then, rather than component, I'm going to start with render equals, and we're just going to put this hello world here, sort of to prove that I haven't broken it yet. Maybe. What's going on here? Property should be placed on a new line. I can do that just for you. Unexpected block statement surrounding the arrow body. Move the return value. Oh man. Okay. This is lint and pretty are getting really annoying. But there. Very simple. Fine. Put it on one line. Okay. So again, if I come back to my example here and refresh, the site cannot be reached because we didn't start it. Give it a second. Wait till it starts running. Longer than I would expect. Unhandled promise rejection. Browser history needs a DOM. Oh, right. Okay. There's some additional bits that need to happen here. And actually, I think at this point we may need to stop using this render to static markup bit. So here, let me read this error to you. It says, unhandled promise rejection warning. Unhandled promise rejection. Invariant violation. Browser history needs a DOM. What it's saying is that this doesn't actually have a DOM because we're using, I believe it's because we're using this render to static markup, which essentially kind of just spits out a string in an index here. So we're going to change this to I can't say that's right either for sure, but we'll try it. Let's see what happens. No, this looks like the same. Browser history needs a DOM. See what the solution here is. Essentially noted in the comments, you may hit this error by wrapping your app component in a browser router, when it instead is your client app that should be wrapped. Aha. So it sounds like what I did is I put this here when in fact it should be a layer down. Okay, let's try that. It's gonna get messy before it gets clean, that's for sure. So we've added these things here. I don't think I need all of them. We're going to wrap this in browser router. DOM. Inside of this, we're going to add a app. Yeah, no? Missing trailing comma. Cool. So I had to import React so that I could use this JSX syntax. It is now saying unexpected new line after parenthesis. We're just going to add a null there so that it shuts up. Aren't we? And then add a comma. Ah, okay. Right. So I have to tell this. Oh, okay. So that's why I was using React DOM servers, because this isn't being reliably, this isn't being, okay. We're going to change our approach ever so slightly. I was using React DOM server to render static markup because we wanted to serve this out to some markup that gets injected on a page, whether as an iframe or as a call to this function. We may end up changing this back again, but I'm going to keep using React DOM server here. I don't think I need to make all of those changes at once. And we're going to render to static markup. And this may be something that we have to undo. There's a chance. What is the problem? Okay. So what this is going to do is it's going to take whatever this component turns into and spit out static markup. So turn all the markup into a string, making it a little, well, less server-side dynamic, only rendered once, but I think that's okay. We then no longer need this. And in here, I'm going to, well, first we're going to start with hello world again to keep it simple and hopefully show that I haven't completely broken everything. This is now running again. Let's refresh. No. Browser history needs a DOM. Yeah, okay. Maybe what I need is a static router. Server-side rendering scenarios when the user isn't actually clicking around, so the location never actually changes, hence the name static. Aha! Great. Let's try that. We're going to instead use a static router, which shouldn't need all the dynamicism of the DOM. Yeah, okay, it's back. So now I've got this static router here. In theory, what I want to declare inside of this app are some routes. Keep forgetting. And now I can say route path equals slash, and then render equals a function that returns that. There. I've just got to close this. Great. I think this will still work. Let's find out. Yes, it does still work. The prop context is marked as required in static router, but its value is undefined. That's because the static router needs to be passed in the location and the context from create server, which comes from HTTP. Interesting. Okay, so we're going to pass in the location and context from Express instead. We just need to figure out what those are. React router, static router, express, context. Oh boy. Oh dear, oh dear. Okay. All I'm looking for is oh, no, well, it passes in an empty context. That works for me. And location is rec.url. So let's do rec being the request, which is passed in up here. That's the location. Contexts needn't be anything. Apparently. We should probably see what that context is used for. We may end up needing it anyway. Okay. That rendered. Nope, don't need to see my password manager. That's great. Okay. This rendered, there's no warnings in the console, so that's a start. So now inside of the app here, we're going to declare the route that will then render some jobs. So we're going to make a component here called a job list, and this is where we're going to move some of the magic that we had put in index.html before. Okay, done that. Hopefully some of this makes sense. I'm doing a bad job of keeping an eye on the chat today. Anyone have any questions so far? So far, no. Okay. Twitter? No. Good. All right. So I know that we're going to use match in here. Job list dot prop types equals match prop types dot shape. Good. Okay. So we're going to have a match prop that's passed in here. Lovely. That'll be my job list. And for all the routes in here, so it gets confusing because there's sort of two layers of routing happening, but we're gonna say component equals job list. And now I need to do that. So let's explain what's going on in here. This would be if I had a need for multiple types of job listings or multiple views of this, we could declare each of those views in here with a different path beginning. So in other words, I could have a job list here. I could have a job, something like a random job, let's call it, where this going to /random would give me a random job, etc., right? We could do that. Or, for example, if I wanted to have a bunch of paths for, like, Charlotte, I could have jobs in Charlotte, and they would come from something that I'd have to make called Charlotte jobs, for example. For now, we're just going to render our job list component, which will do some of the magic based on the route that's passed into the application here. Wrapping this all in React Router makes some of that matching easier, which is what I'm trying to do here. So I've created this job list component, which right now just does that. It does a console.dir, and then we're going to do a return, and we're going to return this is the job list, and save that. And it'll probably reformat a bunch of things. Hey, it didn't. Match is not required, but has no corresponding default prop declaration. We're going to shut off required default props because we don't need that level of thoroughness here. Require default props, and we're going to define that as 0. So it stops bugging me about that. So inside of here, we've got all that set up. We'll worry about this load jobs in a second here. What I want to show now is if I come back here and I refresh this, of course it breaks. That's what I wanted, right? It was refreshing. In the background, it is now rendering nothing. Because, why? Did I set this up wrong? That might need to be lowercase. Yeah, okay. Just one of those things that you kind of get used to. So now we have a job list showing here. So now is where we're going to move some of the magic from index in. So I'm going to take this whole bunch of code here, all of this, and take it out of here. All of that. All of it. Don't need any of it. Okay, that cleans up index. Inside of here, I'm going to take all that code and paste it. We're going to move it around. We're also going to need to declare, well, we'll do it the other way. Okay, so we've got lots of changes to do here. What I want to do is have this job list now render these jobs like we were doing an index before. So let's talk about that. So we're going to take this from a very simple function and turn it into, let me explain something else first. Okay, as I load this page, I'm going to pull up my console here, and you're going to see path/URL/ is exact true params blah. So I could say hello and put that there. It now renders that. It shows how it's matching. So in both cases here, it's rendering a path of nothing for a URL of nothing, but now you can see is exact is false. If, for example, I were to put in ID here. Oops, sorry, let it refresh. Now we can see that we're getting path of ID for URL of /hello is exact as true, and I'm getting a param of ID hello. So we could have these set up. I can name this whatever I want here. We could have these set up so that I have two different parameters pushed in, like latitude and longitude. And if a latitude and longitude are supplied, it renders this job list. That's helpful. I could also instead use a market ID if I wanted. So I think if I did something like this, oops. Oh, yeah, okay. React doesn't like it if you return two things as the base of a component. It should restart, okay. Now I have two job lists showing, and part of the reason there is that I need to import something else from this. A switch, which will only render one thing, and now I don't need this fragment. See this reset. So now it should only render one, a job list, because it matched one of these things. If I say hello, it'll render the job list, and we'll see that we now instead have a market ID of hello. So what I'm setting up here is a couple of different URL schemes that we can render on. So let's say, just for sake of argument, 0, 0 would give me a latitude of 0 and a longitude of 0. We can use those as inputs to build out my job list inside of this job list function here. So I can say if I have those, then now I have latitude and longitude at my disposal, which I can use to build a config to render some jobs. So I'm going to set this up in the way that my API up there expects it. Okay. Set these as undefined, which really isn't doing anything except for defining a structure here for me. And what we're going to do is we're going to say config.market.chords equals chords. So now I've put together this config object, which is really a monster of my own design, which could probably use some simplifying, that we're going to pass into this load jobs function, which I'm going to externalize here because it is not helpful. So we're going to take this load jobs guy and move it into my util here. And basically put it at the bottom. So ultimately, we're just going to be calling this load jobs function from the job list. I no longer need these. We've got this load jobs function at our disposal. Now what I can say is load jobs config. Okay. So this may be violating some React stuff, and we're probably going to have to rewrite parts of this. But now we've got this list of jobs, and now from there we can do what we were doing before. Pull in the map function from Lodash, and now return a job listing, job equals job. So now I've really moved just a bunch of things around. This may not work, and I have some suspicions as to why. Okay, so this returns just a list of jobs now. there are some things we need to do to keep React happy, like give this thing a key. We also have to import the job listing. There we go. Okay. Does not match the underlying file system. I had a typo before. Okay, so let's explain what's going on here. Based on the props that come in, if I have a latitude and longitude provided, I create this coordinate object based on that latitude and longitude. I push that into this config, which we're passing into the load jobs function, which we wait to come back. When that comes back, it fills this jobs thing with a list of jobs. We then iterate over that for each job and the index of said job. We create a job listing with a key of that index. This is just something you have to do with lists in React to make it happy. And then we feed in a job because this job listing thing uses job as a parameter. Job listing, excuse me, takes in a job as a parameter. Okay, we'll pass in a campaign in a moment, but there's something else I need to do here. So this won't entirely, or it won't work as it sits right now. What I have to do is put this inside of some kind of a container, and to do that I have to set it up like this. So what this is saying is that's a horrible way to put it. We're running a div that has all these job listings inside of it. Okay, now let's see if it works. I kind of don't think it will. We're giving this a latitude and longitude of 0, 0. Instead, I'm gonna pass in my latitude and longitude of this. So it's a little silly, but I have to pass it in as the URL parameters for now. This and that. And let's see what happens. So, objects are not valid as a React child. Found object promise. If you meant to render a collection of children, use an array instead. Okay, that's exactly what well, not exactly what I thought would happen, but it's breaking where I thought it would break. What this means is that inside of a React component, it is, oops, not in there. We're going to close the things we don't need for now. Inside of a React component, you cannot use this await feature. The reason for that is basically just because of the way that the React is structured. This render is only ever meant to return a renderable JSX or HTML snippet. So we're going to have to convert this from a simple React component into a component class. So we're going to say class job list extends react.component. And this is going to become the render function. And all of this will get indented. It'll make sense in a second. So now we've got that. There's no longer props. It's now called this.props. And we're going to add a component willmount function. Actually, a constructor function. And the constructor gets props. This is all stuff that I have sort of committed to memory, but you could look this up on React's documentation on the Facebook GitHub pages site. So inside of this constructor, we are going to do the job loading and save to state for this component. So we're going to define a state. And that will be null, undefined, whatever, it doesn't really matter. The goal is to, okay, it doesn't like that. We'll do it in here. So we're going to define a jobs thing here that will populate, just like we were doing in the render function before. Set it to the state here, and basically what's going to change is that this will be jobs dot, or the jobs list here will come from the state of the component. So I'm going to move all this stuff. Match is equal to props, so we pull that out of the props. We get a latitude and longitude, create this config, just like we were doing before. I'm not sure this will work, actually. Constructor can't be an async method. That seems fair. So we're going to have to do this with component will mount. This says this dot set, oops, we're going to do this dot set state, and inside of that we feed it an object which will become the state for this thing. Unused state field jobs. Yeah, cool. Okay. Shut up, prettier. What we've done here now is set this up as a React component which has this lifecycle function of component will mount, which gives us access to the props of the component to run some computation before we allow it to render. What that effectively will do will stop this iframe from being interactable until we load jobs, which is not ideal, but it is one way to do it, and it really should only take a flash here. So now this should be running again. I should have this. Nope, cannot read property jobs of null. Okay. It's hard to tell where that's coming from, but my guess is that it is here. No, it's this dot state because I never initialized the state. So, no, not static. Is it static? We'll do it in the constructor. This may already be going off the rails. And that's okay, we're learning here. I haven't really had to do a React thing as a static bit of markup. We shall see. Okay, something didn't work there. Cannot read property ID of undefined. There are only a few places where I'm using ID. Let's do this. It's got to be in here. Somewhere I'm accessing ID with a lowercase I and D. Let's do this as a case-sensitive search. It could be all of those. Got it, okay. This will look unhappy for a second here. Realized that I need to spell these things out the way I've written these functions. That's completely okay. It just needs to be consistent. How are we doing here? Okay. I'm not sure if that gave me an error this time. So let's clear that, run this again. Cannot read property ID of undefined. Okay. I'm going down a bad road here. I think it's because I'm fussing about with this static stuff. I think. Let's just, before we do any of this stuff, we're going to do, we are here with a config of I want to see how far this thing is getting before it crashes. Oop. Oh, all those things are undefined. Oh. I have no props. Really? Okay. Stop props is match. Latitude and longitude. Okay. Not super sure what's going on. Oh man, that was stupid. It was buried a level deeper. Okay, cool. So what I was looking at here is I spat out the match, and inside of match it has params, which contains latitude and longitude. I had just typed that incorrectly or gotten it wrong at some point. So now let's try loading this and see what happens. Cannot read property ID of undefined. I tell you, that's completely fair. really overcomplicating this on myself here. We're going to get rid of this config thing at some point because it is making this more complicated than it needs to be. Oh. Had to change it into places. Okay. I think we're there now. Can only update a mounting component. This usually means you called set state outside a component will mount on the server. This is a no op. I agree. All of this means I'm breaking React stuff. Okay, warning, set state can only update a mounting component. This usually means you called set state outside of component will mount on the server. Yes, I did. Okay. So that means that because we're doing this as, this all comes back to what I thought I was going to end up having a problem with in the end, is that because we have this rendering as a React server app, we can't have client-side asynchronous behavior because I'm using that static rendering. Which basically means we need to go back to index.js here, and we're going to convert this. Rather than using React DOM server, we're going to create this as an iframe that lives on its own. And this is going to be React DOM.render, and it's going to render this, and it's going to spit it into document.get, what is it? Let me just pull up the React router docs again. We're going to use a regular router from the basic example they've got here. No. No, sorry, I want React React DOM.render. Okay, I was using the wrong document. Document.get element by ID, and it's going to be called app. There we go. Okay. So document is not defined, means we have to define a global in here. ESLint globals window true. Great. Okay. Now ESLint should hopefully stop with all of the yelling. No, of course not. Browser true. Okay. We back. I might not need this. Yeah, okay. So now there's a bit of a trick involved. Some of this stuff is going to get moved around once again. I have to create an HTML file that will be served by Express. The HTML file will load the React app. Let's do that. There we go. God, how the hell do I do this? Okay. Now, React basic example express. Just gonna look some of this stuff up to save me time. Ooh, Twilio, huh? Interesting that they blogged about this. Hey, that's funny. We're going to use this blog from a friend of the stream, Josh Finney. Who knew? Oh, this looks like Python, though, Josh. No, wait, what is this? Cool. Okay. I'm not sure what syntax that was, but makes a good point that the script should be loaded at the bottom. Fine, I'll look it up. It's very simple, of course. App.use. Once again, more comments to save the world. And then we're going to put in express.static. I think I just need index.html. Yeah, let's try that. So what this should have done is an error. Cannot get slash. Yes, no. Funny how many times I find myself back at the beginning when doing these things. At this point, I'm just moving things around once again. I've backed my way into building what should have really just been a create React app, which is kind of funny. That's much more heavyweight than it needs to be in some sense. Oh man, I have frustrated myself. Lord. Okay, this is all. You know what? I'm going to call it a day for the stream. I'm getting to the point where my brain's a little fried trying to explain while I'm debugging. Yeah, thanks for hanging out. We made some good progress today. Basically, the next goal is to get these route configs working so that we can do some dynamic queries for markets. We'll try and tackle that next week. For the time being, I am going to hop off. You know where to get at me on Twitter and email and all that other stuff. And if there's anything else I can do for you, just give me a shout. Have a good week, everyone.